Well, hello and welcome to the On It Not In It podcast interview series. I'm your host, Todd Eppert, and today I'm joined by Chad Hoffman, who is the president and CEO of the Ridgewood Banking Company. Chad, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with a brief background as to who you are and what your company does to support the small business world?
Sure, Todd. It's again great to be with you, and appreciate the opportunity. Community banking is just that field that not a lot of people know about. You always hear about the big banks in the news, and the community banks really just aren't in the news that much. But we're a very strong part of the communities, obviously, that we serve. Usually, if a community bank pulls out of a town, that town, really all the other businesses leave as well. And so a community bank is a very important part of some of those smaller areas of the states and in the country. And we still do a lot of the small business and the ag lending for businesses and farmers that are out there, right? The larger banks usually don't get into that kind of a realm too much. It's not where they like to play. So very important part, we believe, of the industry. And I'm involved with what's called the CBAO, which is the Community Bankers Association of Ohio, as well as the ICBA, which is the Independent Community Bankers of America, just because we lobby for community banks, that model, what that looks like, and make sure that when regulators make rules, that they understand the differences between large banks and the community banks, and what those rules can do for both. So no, it's great. I've been with the bank for 30 years, and when I started, we were 68 million in assets and had 24 employees, and today we're just short of 1.3 billion and have about 210 employees in total. So it's been fun to watch the growth. I wasn't president at the start. I became president in 2007. So I've been doing this job now for a few years, but it's been fun to work with a lot of different individuals and just watch that growth and kind of scaling a business. Even being a bank, we still had to scale much like a small business would from an entrepreneurial perspective. So to watch those changes and things we had to do differently, because what worked at one size didn't necessarily work at another.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so even though you're not the founder of the small business, as a small community bank, you've had to almost act like a small business, right? Many hats, probably lots of different things you've had to do, pivot here and there, all the things that our small business owners have to do as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it is no difference, because again, I think the biggest word and that I love is relevance, right? I mean, everybody takes for granted that their business model will last forever, and as we've seen historically, that's not the case. There's many businesses out there that are one time were on top of the world. I look at a Sears, I look at a Blockbuster, Kodak, and these companies that were doing really well, but they just assumed that their business model was going to last, and it did not. In 2000, there were 300 banks and savings and loans in the state of Ohio. Today, there's about 165. So, in just over 20 years, almost half of them have merged with somebody else. They don't fail; they just merge, right? So now you've got fewer banks, and there's very few what they call de novo banks, which are brand new ones that start up from scratch, because the regulatory environment's tough. The capital requirements of getting in, it's difficult. And so when you see an industry that's contracting like that and nobody new is getting in, you got to ask about the relevance of the model, and you don't want to be blind to it. So we're trying to create a new model here. Inside, we tried to decide, okay, what can we do as a community bank that maybe other industry or other size banks won't do. And we started an advertising firm inside the bank. We have Ridgewood Marketing, where we actually help our clients market themselves, build websites, logo designs, just anything you can think of from an ad agency perspective, we actually do for our clients. We have a payroll company inside here. We do payroll for companies anywhere from one employee. We've got one that's almost 400. So, to do that for them, we do Richwood Financial is that place where we help companies set up 401ks for themselves, as well as help individuals, invest for the future too. A lot of banks have that side, but it's just that importance to tie together, how they can not just to offer accounts and loans, but how do you make them better in the future? And the last thing we do is called Ridgewood U, and it's an education arm, because we believe that the small business owner, a great book out there by Michael Gerber called, the E-Myth Revisited, that says, entrepreneurs are great at working in their business, not on their business, which I know that you ascribe to, right? So hence the name, but that's what we're trying to do, is say, how can we help the business owner? Because again, my team's heard me say it, if the only human being you see is the UPS driver bringing your Amazon order, you don't need a community and you don't need a community bank, right? We won't be necessary for you. we do the best with those business community, or the businesses that are involved in the community, people that are coaching softball or coaching baseball, or involved in the local nonprofit boards. The people that are getting involved, those are the people we do the best with. But you won't have those people if they're not successful in their businesses in town, or in their businesses, and what they're doing. So how do we help them compete against big boxes, against retail online? What does that look like? And so anything we can do to help them, besides, yes, we have accounts, we have loans, but what else can we do to strengthen their financial base?
Excellent. Love hearing all that detail, Chad. Thank you so much. So yeah, supporting that small business is not just giving them a loan. You're doing a lot of other things as a bank to support them. So
Exactly.
let me take you back that 30 years. You're thinking about starting a career in banking. Why choose to go to work for a small business bank rather, or a small community bank, rather than go to one of the big boys? What was that spark for you?
And I have to admit, I grew up in a small community, about 2,500 people, graduated in a high school class of 100. And my family has been involved in the town and in the bank for many years. We're not family. It's not a family owned bank. I know there's many of those out there in the country. We're not that, but we have been involved in a long time. It's just worked out. My grandfather was president, my uncle was president, and my mother actually was president before I was. And it's worked out that way. Like I said, we don't own it. We don't even own we don't have any shareholders that own over 5%. So but we are community owned. So we're what's called closely held. We're not publicly traded. So we have just over 900 stockholders in total, and they're all community individuals. We don't have any institutional stockholders. They all they all invest in us because of what we're doing in these communities that we serve.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear. So you're still running the bank's still a business. You're still doing
It
those
is.
things. So tell us, what are some of the misconceptions you've had to deal with? You go into the small banking world, you're from a small community. Probably you started with some ideas and then you're like, whoa, that's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. So what are some misconceptions you've had to deal with?
Oh wow! I guess one of the big ones that happens with community banks and even businesses, and one of the things that we've had to do education on is, banks are not investors. They're always going to be the ones holding the bag at the end of the day, and we can never do better than what the interest rate that we charge on a loan. Right? An entrepreneur goes in, and hey, if their business takes off, they can sell it for a whole lot of money. They can, they've got all these benefits of scaling up and doing all these exciting things. We just get paid back our money plus interest. That's as good as it gets for us. And so, when they come to us, sometimes that was one of the things that surprised me early, is how many businesses come and they're kind of looking for an investor. They're not looking for a loan with a bank, because it's a startup business. It's something that, they want to scale up. And, that bank has to make sure that they're going to get paid back at the end of the day. It's not a risk. There's no upside for us besides just getting paid back. So that was one of the things, I guess, that surprised me is how many approach a bank with that investment type of mentality. Another thing is the regulatory environment. That thing has just evolved. It's changed. It does swing based on political party. I'll admit that openly. It just sometimes it's really, really heavy. Sometimes it lightens up a little bit. But banks, they're in business to be successful as well. No different than the entrepreneur. And sadly, in kind of the environment today, it's almost becoming the banking is a God-given right. You should be able to have a bank account and it have not charge you any kind of fees. Well, there's a lot of expenses on this side. Just to stay compliant is a significant cost. To follow all the rules and regulations that the government has set up. I believe in regulation, and watching things to make sure that nobody is getting into any kind of trouble. But I think we've seen historically, banks still fail, things still happen. But at the end of the day, there's oversight, and then there's kind of like overreach, or really going after it. And I don't like it when they say you can't charge any more than this for a specific fee. I wouldn't want any entrepreneur to be told you can't charge anything more than this for the product that you make. And if a consumer doesn't like it, they can choose somewhere else. They can work with somebody else. That's just, to me, that's the American model, and what we need to try to stick to. So that's probably my other biggest surprise as a banker and getting into it is how that regulatory body or that regulatory field kind of changes over time.
Got it. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So next question is, I'm going to ask the same question, but I'm going to ask it from two different perspectives for our listeners. So from your perspective as a banker, you talk to a lot of small business owners, I'm sure, on a regular basis. What are
Yes.
their biggest challenges today? What are they facing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, after COVID, things are just different, correct? I mean, I think the biggest number one thing we see today is staffing. Getting qualified staffing, getting people to come in, and everybody wants to work a hybrid job or wants to work a remote job, and some of the small businesses are physically intensive. I mean, we had somebody replace cement out in front of our bank just 2 years ago, and there wasn't anybody on that crew that was under 60 years of age. And we asked them, we said, hey, don't you bring anybody on to work with you and help you out? And they're like, yeah, they usually last for a day or two. And so they're having trouble getting individuals to take some of these positions that have been filled for years by tradesmen that are on. And it's not just tradesmen. I mean, it's professional, it's trades, it's a lot of different things where, to me, keeping people there, it used to be, you started with a job and a lot of times you retired with the job, right? You worked at a place I mean, I've been here for 30 years. You worked at a place for 30 years. A lot of new generations, 2-3 years, and it's like, oh, I got to go do something new. I got to stretch my horizons. And that's about the time that they're becoming useful for whatever business they're working for, right? It takes a while to really understand it and get that knowledge, and then they're gone. And so, the business is trying to retain them. I'm doing a lot of training right now where we're doing a lot of education with businesses around how to kind of engage with the team members. You just assumed they were engaged before, but now you've got to work with them. You've got to, offer opportunities for growth, develop the right type of team with the right skill sets, but then, kind of invest in their future too. It's not just, hey, I'm paying them a salary. There's some other things that I think the small business owner needs to do to keep and retain those employees. So that's definitely number one. Obviously, inflation is a big one. The other one today, and only banks see it the way we do, and unless it's touched you, you don't understand, is fraud. The amount of fraud out there today, if you're writing checks and sending them in the mail, it's just a matter of time. That's a Russian roulette, honestly. The amount of physical check fraud today is astronomical. You all think that it's going to be electronic. It's going to be, all these digital things that happen. We see more fraud through physical checks than anything else today by far. And so, even on the small business side, if you're a small business and you're paying some of your vendors with large checks that go through the mail, that's you're going to end up with a problem at some point. So, that's another thing too that just is happening to the small businesses. When it hits them, we just had one get hit for $55,000. They'd written a check to a specific company and they thought they'd paid it. The check came out of their account. Everything was fine. Then the vendor called him, 2 months later and says, hey, why haven't you paid us yet? He said, well, of course we did pay you. I've got this canceled check. It's all good. And we never received it. Here, it had been stolen out of a post office. I mean, they were able to track it and figure it out. Stolen out of a post office, and somebody used that check and deposited into an account with a similar name at a different institution. And it was 2 months before anybody figured out there was a problem.
Wow. Yeah.
And like I said, you don't know until you get bit that, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was a thing. So we really encourage electronic payments today as much as possible. A lot of people think, oh, that's where you get hacked. I mean, when you think of all the information that's on a check, it's really easy to alter. It doesn't take a lot of, skill sets or know-how to make a check, deposit it and make it look good.
Yeah, good point. So, okay, I told you I was going to ask the same question twice. So, you already talked about the regulatory information and things like that that's causing you issues, but what is the bank's biggest challenge when it comes to working with small business owners?
Oh, that's a good question. Biggest challenge with working with small business owners is probably kind of updating them with that regulatory environment change. For instance, we now, with the way that things get regulated, we make a loan to you. And Todd, if I made you a 10-year loan and I approve it, and I make you a 10-year loan, it's a large one. Let's say it's over $1 million. It used to be I made you that loan and we didn't talk for the next 10 years unless you had another need. We might reach out to you with accounts or things like that, but that loan we didn't worry about. You make the payments on time, you're not hearing from the bank. Now, kind of through the regulatory environment, this 4-letter word out there called risk, that they want you to risk assess all of your loans. And so to kind of train the small business that, I know I made you the loan, you've made every payment on time, but every year I need you to send me your taxes and your financial statement. Because what I need to know is if your business is deteriorating, if it's getting worse, if you only got half the sales you had the year before, I have to risk rate your loan different, even though you're still making payments every month. I'm doing some things on the backside that's a regulatory requirement that, when we get regulated, they'll come in and say, well, you don't know about this loan. They'll make us downgrade the loan, even if it's current. So, that can cause us problems on the backside on some cost and things. And so we have to collect this information on a yearly basis, even though you've made every payment on time as agreed. And that's a tough thing to work with them and get them to understand. And I understand the frustration, but it's actually in the loan documents that they sign that they will provide that to us. But you don't want to say, well, you told us you would. I mean, you're trying to make them understand why it's necessary, and it's tough.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that perspective that you're sharing that, and I'll speak for it. Small business owners,
Please.
a lot of times they don't like to share their financials. They don't like to share their tax returns because oftentimes that's their personal stuff, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like a publicly traded company where it's the financials are published for every shareholder and every public person that wants to look at it. We can look at it, but
Yep.
you're talking about digging into the real details of someone's financial life, and it's our finances are as personal as our relationships are.
Very much so, Todd. And that's where that challenge lies, right? Is we understand their feelings towards it.
Yeah.
But when you have, the Federal Reserve, now we're audited specifically or examined by the Federal Reserve in the state of Ohio. But some banks are the FDIC, some are the OCC, it just depends on the regulator. But I promise you, they're all going after this specific thing. You have to assess your risks. And even though that person's made every payment on time, hey, they've got half the sales they used to. What are you doing to make sure that this doesn't become a problem loan? Because it used to be for us, we waited until you made a late payment.
Right.
And then we're talking, right? But if you've made every payment on time for 6 years, I don't really care. I'm happy that you're paying me back and everything's good.
Yeah.
But I do understand the risk side. But in some cases, when a business is doing well, and like you said, they get very private about their stuff. I don't want to lose a customer because I'm required to gather this information that, hey, I trust them to make every payment. It's not me questioning them that they're going to do it. I have to prove to somebody, a third party that's looking at it, that this is a good loan.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. Very good point. And like you said, you probably walk a few loans because people don't want to have to share all that information later, right?
It doesn't
they'd rather
become an
not,
issue.
yeah, they'd rather not take the loan and maybe put off the investment they were going to make or the growth opportunity they were going to take or the risk they were going
Right.
to take because they don't want to have to deal with all the regulations.
That's correct. And I don't want to lose that opportunity because of that stickler, because there's some people I would love to do business with and would trust them to make every payment. There's just some people, I mean, we make it to the person, not to the individual, not to the situation or to the collateral. We've analyzed the person and we know, hey, this person, even if things are tough, they're going to make their payments if at all possible. And
Right.
we have very little charge offs because that's the kind of customers that we work with. Hey, every day isn't a great one, right? Every year isn't a great one, but by gosh, when it comes down to it, if it's at all possible, you meet your obligations.
Sorry about that.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah. So thank you. So let's talk a little bit. You've been mentioning a few things. You mentioned the pandemic and a few other things like regulations that have caused you to change the way you do business. But so how do you stay, I'll call it adaptable, and how do you stay innovative in the banking industry when there is so much of that stuff on top of you from the regulation side?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is to keep, not to get too locked in, like I mentioned before, on the model. You've got to be willing to change some things. Hey, just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean that you always need to do it that way. What's a more innovative way? What's a more efficient way to get that done? I read a lot of books. I've got a library of business books of probably 300 of them, and I love to learn from other people, other industries, and what they've done. We try to emulate some of the great experiences that some great companies do for their clients. There's nothing saying that a bank can't provide an awesome experience. It's not something that most people think of when they think of banks, but we actually in our lobbies, Todd, we have coffee shops. We've built coffee shops into our banks that we actually run ourselves. And we've used a local vendor. They're able to make donations to local nonprofits that we work with. Customer makes a donation, and as a thank you, the bank gives you so many drinks at our coffee shop. It's actually so many cups, and so whatever you put in the cup is up to you. But we have quality, coffee drinks, smoothies, frappes. I mean, different kinds of drinks that you would get at a Starbucks style place. But we're doing it right here in the local institution, and I've got seating downstairs in this office for 30 people. we have music playing. It's a Wi-Fi space. So, to look at a model like that and say, hey, we've got this bank building, but people can do a lot of their, banking at home in their underwear. Not that you need that picture in your mind, but they can do that, right? To say, okay, how do they don't need to come in for a transaction if they don't want to? So how can we make them want to come in for another reason? And so to become that third space, that place that everybody feels safe. It's a bank. Hey, I'll stop there on the way to work, on the way from work. We open at 7 o'clock in the morning just so we can get people before they go to work or to school. We get kids that come into our coffee shops now. When's the last time you had high school kids going into a bank lobby? And we get it on a regular basis. So, that next generation of customers. So again, it's no different than any other industry. You have those challenges that are going to be, specific to the industry, whether it's regulatory, whether it's environmental, whatever it may be. But you got to be willing to move with those things. You can sit there and complain about it all day, or you can attack it and come up with new ideas.
Oh man, I love those stories. Yeah, you talked a little bit about all the other services that you provide your clients, but
Right.
the coffee shop, what an innovative idea. And the fact that you open the doors at 7 a.m., another very non-bank innovative idea. That's what I would call that.
Well, and it is difficult to staff, because we have to have staffing that rotates versus you used to be able to have a person here you used to have the old banking hours, right? I remember those days where it was, I think if everybody worked the hour they were supposed to, it was a 34-hour week. And, that was banker's hours. You were
Right.
closed before businesses closed. You were open after businesses opened. It just was banker's hours. That's what they called it. And today, we don't assume that people have to use this or that they're going to walk through our doors. We try to make them want to do that, want to work with us. And so we actually have a value out there. It's our vision statement that we called to inspire, protect, and celebrate anything that helps communities thrive. So, for us, it's all the investment in the community, but kind of in that inspiration side is, okay, the bank is doing these different things. What can I as a business do that makes me more relevant to my customers or to the community in general?
Excellent.
So, we try to do things of that nature and that vision. And we beat each other up a lot when we created it a few years back, but we're really trying to live that out today through many different the services we provide, plus the experience that we're doing.
Got it. Got it. So big reader, lots of experience, been with a lot
Yep.
of businesses, helped a lot of people out over the 30 years you've been doing it. So the big question, let me put you in the advisor role. What advice would you offer to the aspiring entrepreneurs out there that are just starting their journey, or maybe they're hitting the wall and they're struggling a little bit early on in their businesses?
Don't hesitate to ask for help. There's a lot of resources out there. I mean, you're doing this podcast, right? There are podcasts, there are books, there are resources, there's consultants, there are people. You don't have to know everything. But a lot of entrepreneurs feel like they have to. And if you do that, I think you get into a trap of you don't know what you don't know. So, use consultants. I'm a big believer in using consultants and trying to learn from them so you don't have to use them forever. But, you've got to continue to just learn and find out what's going on, but learn from others. Don't think you have to do it all or that it makes you look dumb or stupid or uninformed if you're asking somebody else for help, whether it's your banker, your accountant, your tax advisor, any of these types of people, lawyers, there's different people that can help. And I know you think of some of those easy ones, but even business advisors, they're out there. And just like, podcasts to listen to specific ones about businesses and how they've overcome some of the challenges that they've had. Rarely does an entrepreneur exist that somebody hasn't walked that path before them. And if you can learn from their mistakes and some of the ways that they got around it, you might shortcut some of the, you don't have to recreate the wheel sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do. And that's what's exciting about entrepreneurship. But I think I personally see some entrepreneurs that think, I have to know everything. I have to be in control of everything. And I think that's limiting your growth and limiting your scaling to do that.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing those thoughts, Chad. So,
Sure.
Chad, thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate all the time you spent with us and all the thoughts from the other side of the desk when we go to the bank and ask for help, right? So it was great meeting you and learning more about what your own entrepreneurial journey and how you've helped others along the way. To everyone watching and listening, we appreciate it. We'll see you on the next episode. And thanks again, Chad.
Thanks, Todd.